Okay, let's go ahead and get started. And we'll have to start by saying hello to everyone. Good morning to some and good afternoon to others. My name is Keith Harris, and I will be the moderator for this grant applicant grant awardee technical assistance session. At NIFA, I currently serve as the acting director in the bioenergy division, and we want to express gratitude to the attendees for their time and interest in the subject of demystifying the panel review process. Now, I'm happy to be a part of a session that speaks directly to questions related to NIFA's panel process. For all intent and purposes, the scientific reviews are part of a multi-step process, discovery process, used by NIFA to identify proposals which have the best opportunity to address challenges in food and agriculture. Now, before I go further, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Kevin Kephart, who serves as the director, or rather deputy director of NIFA's Institute of Bioenergy, Climate, and Environment. Dr. Kephart will provide the welcome and make opening remarks to officially kick off this session. Kevin, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harris. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank all of you that are taking time out of your schedules, committing your time to learn and participate in this really interesting presentation, this webinar that we have going forward. Thank you so much for that. I also want to thank several people here at NIFA. You're going to be meeting many of our national program leaders, other leaders within NIFA over the course of this particular webinar. Some of the people behind the scenes are going to include Nirja Tegi. We have Lynn Ellingston Giddings and Susan Muhidden who are helping us to operate this webinar. So I just wanted to make sure that I thank all of you and call you out. Means a lot to the success of this. We also have a couple of sign language interpreters, Deborah and Jasmine. Thank you. You don't get enough thanks for this type of effort. So thanks for helping us out on this to make our effort available to a lot of folks who otherwise wouldn't benefit from it. This is going to be a very interesting webinar on our panel processes. This is at the very core of how we operate, how we implement our competitive processes, competitive programs at NIFA. We put a lot of effort into making sure that this effort is effective, but also is objective and equitable. We put a lot of effort into making sure that we ensure those characteristics of the process, and you'll learn about that today. As you listen in, I'd like to maybe even have you think about a couple things. I might be fast forwarding a little bit to the bottom line, but be thinking about, yes, learning about the panel process itself, but be thinking about opportunity for you and for your institution. There's opportunities that you'll learn about to be a participant in the panel process. And we put a lot of effort into making sure that our panels are diverse, and we try to capture as many experiences, understanding, and human diversity as we can, but also diversity in terms of institutional size and region and many other factors that you'll learn about in the slides that we have today. The point is we need all of you. We need everybody to help make this whole process for USDA equitable and objective. So with that, be thinking about those things as you listen in, and hopefully we'll be able to see you later on as a participant, as a panelist in this process. Thanks again to everybody involved in this. And with that, I'll hand it back to Keith. Keith.
Thanks, Kevin. And thanks for bringing up some of those very important points for us to consider while we're going through this session. Now, we have with us NIFA employees who will provide their insight, explain some of the nuances of the panel process, and share their overall experience leading and supporting review panels. So panelists, please let the audience know your role within NIFA, and we'll start at the top of the list. Okay. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Amer.
Thank you, Keith. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amar Fayyad, and I am a plant pathologist by training, and I am a national program leader in the Plant Systems Protection Division within the Institute of Food Production and Sustainability at NIFA. Thank you.
Decatur.
Hi, I am Decatur Foster. I am a toxicologist and fish physiologist by training, but right now I work with the Hispanic Serving Institutions Education Grant Program as a program specialist in NIFA.
Thanks, Decatur. And myself is Keith Harris. I introduced myself a little bit earlier. By training, I'm an agricultural economist and as a practitioner in the area of supply chain. And again, I'll be the moderator for this session today. Mallory?
Good morning. I'm Mallory Koenings. I'm a nutritional scientist and registered dietitian nutritionist by training. I'm a national program leader in our Division of Nutrition, which is within the Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition here at NIFA. And I also serve as the AfriScience coordinator in training.
Excellent. Thanks, Mallory. Maurice?
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maurice Smith, a National Program Leader in Division of Youth and 4-H. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, certainly thanks to all the panelists, and we're really looking forward to, again, your input, your insight as we go through this process today. Now, the panelists will be addressing some previously submitted questions by the audience in somewhat of a conversational format, one with one another, and they will be guided by a slide deck as well, so that we make sure that we cover some of these very important questions. So our sessions will begin with the peer review process. Then it'll transition into the panel manager and panel recruitment portion. That'll allow us to segue into how to volunteer to be a panelist. And then it will provide us with sort of safe passage, if you will, to discuss training resources. Now, if you have any questions in the chat, if you have any questions, you can put in the chat feature, or you can put those in questions in the QA feature box we have. So let's begin with the peer review process. Decatur, would you mind describing your experience and perspective with this peer review panel process?
Yes, of course. So some big picture information here. NIFA receives about 5,500 applications per year and funds about 2,000 annually. Also, we use this peer review process to evaluate applications that are submitted to the competitive grant programs in response to requests for applications. You'll see this acronym a lot today, RFAs. We're going to be splitting this up by talking about the peer review process into three phases: pre-panel, panel, and post-panel.
Yeah, thanks, Decatur, and thanks for being very nimble in that sense, because I think when we look at over 5,500 applications per year and 2,000 that are actually funded, we can kind of see the level of competition and the sheer volume of what we're dealing with. So going through that peer review process, I'd like for you to go as well into kind of talking a bit more about the pre-panel, the panel, and the post-panel process. If we can go to the next slide, please.
So diving into the demystifying of the peer review process, like Keith said, divided into three distinct phases: pre-panel, panel, and post-panel, each phase with its own distinct tasks that need to be completed. We are going to discuss the details of all of the tasks listed here on this slide to help give you a better understanding of what's going on behind the scenes at NIFA. We'll go through the initial screening of applications, the individual reviews written by panelists, the discussion of applications during panel, and finally, the funding decision and creation of a review package that is sent back to applicants. Next slide, please. To give a big picture overview, we're going to follow the journey of an application from submission to the final decision on whether it gets funded or not. So you can see highlighted in yellow here, the question, what happens after an applicant submits the application? The first step here is the initial screening of applications, which is carried out specifically by NIFA staff. We'll also talk about the scientific review process, which is facilitated by NIFA staff, but accomplished by a panel of your peers. And finally, the funding decision, which is ultimately made by NIFA staff. Next slide, please. This graphic is meant to give you an idea of how long the journey of an application takes. The RFA is released and each program is open for submissions anywhere from 1 to 3 months. After the RFA is closed and all applications have been received, a 2 to 3 month process begins where the applications are under review by NIFA staff and panelists. Once the funding decision is made at the end of this 2 to 3 months, it takes another 1 to 2 months for our awards management division to finalize those awards and make funds available to the awardees. On average, a competitive program takes about 6 to 9 months from the RFA release to an award being made to an organization. Our staff works really hard to keep the applicants updated during the process as much as possible. And of course, we always appreciate your patience during this time. Next slide, please. So diving back into some of this detailed demystification. The first phase of the submission to decision journey that I mentioned earlier is the initial screening done by NIFA staff. We use the criteria that is listed in the RFA to ensure that each application fits with the program it was submitted to, and that the applicants have followed all of the required guidelines. We look to make sure that an institution is eligible to apply to a program and that the application doesn't exceed page length limits. We also check to make sure a budget is present and that cost sharing or matching has been addressed if it's applicable. Importantly, I want you to note that the requirement that all documents have to be in PDF format. We emphasize this as PDF is the only format that is recognized by our internal systems at NIFA. So if a document isn't in PDF format, it will be considered missing from the application package, which could affect how competitive your application is. One final very, very important screening criteria: the application must be submitted by 5 p.m. Eastern time of the due date. Anything submitted after that cutoff, even if it's 5:01, cannot be accepted for review. Because of this and how slow the system can sometimes be when everyone's trying to submit on that last day, we recommend submitting your application early if possible. Mallory, over to you.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Decatur, and happy to build. As we might move through the initial screening process, as a proposal has met all of those administrative requirements, now proposals move on to our peer review process, which on the next slide here, we'll go into a little bit more information about. Each distinct NIFA competitive grant program or program area priority holds its own peer review panel to review the applications that have been submitted to that program area priority. And these unique programs recruit their unique volunteer panelists that have the expertise that most closely aligns with the topics of the program and the purpose of the program. As Decatur already mentioned, once the initial screening criteria are met, an application is on to the peer review process. The first step in the peer review process is for the application to be reviewed according to the evaluation criteria published in the RFA by at least 3 individual panelists. They come to their own determination regarding the strengths and the weaknesses of the proposal using those evaluation criteria published in the RFA. Then these individual reviews are a foundation for the the peer review panel's full discussion. And the purpose of that discussion is to reach a consensus opinion on the ranking of proposals, right? For those most closely achieving the evaluation criteria, and aligning with those prescribed expectations and qualities of the proposals. There can be times when some additional expertise would be valuable. And in that case, the process that NIFA utilizes is called an ad hoc reviewer, right? There may be a time when some additional insight from an expert in a particular economics model would be useful, and that individual, right, will be added as a reviewer to that proposal to look at that particular aspect and share their insights with the rest of the peer review panel as they're evaluating the merit and ranking proposals. Now, you've heard us mention multiple times the evaluation criteria. We're going to go ahead and focus on that in our next slide, where, if you would advance, please. Thank you. Where these evaluation criteria, right, are again, right, shared publicly in the RFA, and the exact evaluation criteria, right, that are published in the RFA are the evaluation criteria that our reviewers use to determine, right, the strengths and weaknesses of the proposals. It's important to recognize that the panelists are utilizing the information that you provide them in the grant application. So it can be beneficial to take a step back when you're preparing a grant application and realize that there are, of course, experts in your field that are not intimately familiar with your project, and that providing clear background, right, and clear description of your project to orient them can be very helpful to guide a reviewer through your proposal. Reviewers are expected, right, to not be bringing any external information not already included in the grant proposal to their review. This also means that you'll hear in many of our RFA webinars that links should not be used to circumvent the page limits, right? Reviewers are not expected to click on these links within the project narrative. All of the information in the grant application needs to provide a very clear description, right? A very clear story on what challenges the project's going to address, right? What will be learned from the project, and how, right, the project will be conducted. We do recognize, right, that as part of the required bibliography, right, it is, of course, right, common, accepted, and expected for bibliographic reference citations to include the direct open access links. Those links are acceptable, right? When we're talking about links, right, we're talking about something that would be used in the project narrative as a way to really get around the page limits, and we've set them intentionally so that there's a fair playing field, right, for all applicants. All applicants have the same space, right, the same number of pages with which to convey their project idea. Now moving to some information about once what goes on in the peer review panel.
Mhm.
This, is where the proposals, right, are ranked into categories according to their level of merit. Right, and when we're in the peer review panel, that discussion that goes on with the three reviewers whose individual reviews, right, were the first part of this, is broadened, right? Not only, of course, are those reviewers providing input on the evaluation criteria for the qualities of this proposal, but the full, right, peer review panel hearing the description of the strengths and weaknesses is also involved in asking, right, questions and understanding the qualifications of the project team, the relevance across our food and agricultural systems of the proposed work, and it is through that discussion that what we call the panel summary contents will be formed, and that's really a record of the discussion that the panel had, and noting what were, right, very positive, very exciting elements, the key strengths that the panel saw, and if there were any opportunities for improvement noted that perhaps could make a project even stronger or more competitive in a future round of funding. And so after there has been, right, the full panel meeting, the next phase of the process, right, is funding determinations. And in, the funding determinations are based on the panel's ranking, and of course they do take into account, right, the funding available, right, what resources NIFA has to support the work proposed according to a specific, right, grant program or program area priority. It is often when NIFA receives more meritorious proposals, then we have funding available. So there are times when wonderful work is proposed, and regrettably, we're unable to provide support to it because we don't have the sufficient funding available. There are times, right, when there's not sufficient funding available to support all of the proposals, right, in the highest possible category, right, all of the proposals in outstanding. This does vary program to program and year to year, and of course, like, right, many of your organizations, the resources that we have available do play a role. What I will encourage you all to think about is that every application receives the feedback from the peer reviewers, right? At least the 3 individual reviews. If streamlining needs to take place, and when proposals are competitive and discussed by the full peer review panel, also that panel summary, and that information can be very valuable in determining what what might make a proposal even more clear, even more competitive in the future. We know we're in a very competitive climate, and utilizing that feedback and the resources you have available to you, right? Perhaps requesting a consultation, right, with a national program leader if you're going to consider applying in a future year is highly recommended. And please also, right, be aware that our grant programs do have a resubmission application type, and those proposals have the benefit of one additional page in the project narrative to respond to the previous peer review. So there are wonderful strategies that if a proposal that you submit is declined for insufficient funds or for an unfavorable review, that you might utilize to make that proposal even stronger in future years.
Mhm.
And so kind of breaking down, right, the elements of that review package and saying a little bit more about it, right? It will contain, of course, the strengths and the weaknesses of the proposal according to evaluation criteria. And I do really like to remind applicants that you want to preserve your strengths. Sometimes we might be so focused on improving, right, some areas that may have been noted as a weakness that we may not be making sure that we're continuing to present the strengths that have been recognized. We recognize that a page limit is challenging, but certainly, right, be mindful of all of the positives, right, of all the compliments that a proposal was given, and be sure to give adequate space to those elements, right, as well as some opportunities for improvement if those are ever cited. And what I do want you to take from this slide is that there are cases, right, where a proposal may not be discussed among the full panel and may not have a panel summary. And that is the case when all panelists agree that the proposal is not competitive enough to go through the remainder of the process, that it's would be ideal to streamline that proposal given what the individual ratings are, right? So in cases where all of the individual ratings are relatively low, please do remember that those individual reviews, right, are provided to all and contain great information should you want to utilize it to continue to improve a potential project. And all applicants have the opportunity to meet with a national program leader and discuss maybe learn a little bit more about the program area priority, or if there are any elements of concern. So please realize that we are here to support you. This is very much an expectation of our jobs. It is not an added burden. We definitely encourage you to take advantage of all the resources that you have. I will note that there are some NIFA grant programs where proposals are not streamlined. And there are some NIFA grant programs where key characteristics of an applicant organization or of a project director may may be taken into account and may protect an application from being streamlined. And so you'll see that shown here, if an applicant organization might be an institution, right, that's serving historically underrepresented groups, that could be something, right, that protects an application from streamlining, or if in some cases, if the project director is an early career investigator, that in that case, an application would be provided with that additional panel summary feedback. I do want to convey that this does vary grant program to grant program.
Mallory, thank you for that. And as well as Decatur also. And you brought up some really good points. And in this section of the peer review process, have you ever come across a situation where a PD wanted to get in contact with you before the proposal went to panel? Perhaps they may have wanted to know, hey, did it make it through? Was it accepted just for review from that standpoint? So I'll open it up to you and Decatur, but also like to know if Amber or Maurice has any comments on that as well.
Sure. So there are two scenarios that come to mind for me immediately, and Decatur, I'll let you build off of what perhaps anything that I forget. So the first is that often I hear from potential applicants as soon as the request for applications is published. And that's an opportunity to reach out with any clarifying questions after the RFA technical assistance webinar has occurred. If something in a frequently asked questions document just still really isn't clear for a specific scenario. And of course, having a discussion about if the project idea aligns with the grant program. And we do tend sometimes to describe those discussions as consultations, right, for program fit. Those are very, very common as as project directors are assembling their teams and pulling together these proposals. The second scenario that tends to come to mind is we try to be very proactive in our communication with our applicants. So after the initial screening takes place, we do proactively send an email communication to all of the applicants whose proposals, right, met all of those administrative requirements and are advancing to peer review. And that communication lets folks know, okay, great, right? I'm moving on to the peer review panel, and we also provide some key guidance, right? If you're going to change organizations, or right, if any of these, a few characteristics, right, apply to your proposal, right? Please let us know during this period, and it also provides a date of when we anticipate those funding determinations might be made, and when you'll hear from us next, right? When you'll hear from NIFA about those funding determinations. Decatur, what might you add?
I mean, yeah, you actually said it all. That's exactly how the programs that I'm involved with, they are the same as that.
Yeah, because those sorts of things. Oh, Amber, go ahead. Go right ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Keith. So I wanted to add, that we always, as program staff, including national program leaders and program specialists, we encourage communication by potential applicants. And as Mallory mentioned, we discussed the fitness of the proposed idea or her work. Many programs, we typically ask a potential applicant before we meet with them to send us a small blurb about what the idea is, so it helps us with the discussion. This also happens sometimes organically when we are attending professional society meetings, and we are approached by prospective applicants as well with their ideas. And those discussions are very helpful because sometimes we can suggest to potential applicants that we may not see your proposed idea as a fit for this particular program, but we think it may fit in another program. So again, we always encourage those communication with the prospective applicants. Back to you, Keith.
No, thanks, Amer. That's a very good point, and a really good way of sort of reiterating some of the points that was brought up earlier. Yeah, we do encourage and we welcome those type of conversations because essentially we want to be able to find proposals that really directly address and have a great opportunity to addressing some of the challenges we have in food and agriculture. Maybe just another question before we go over to the next section here, because I know sometimes that evaluation process, sometimes it feels like, which Mallory went over very well here. Sometimes the evaluation process to some might seem like a bit of a black box, meaning that you don't know exactly what's going on inside that black box. Maybe it may be a little bit somewhat secretive, but I think Mallory, you pointed out some really good points in terms of how we try to illuminate or how we try to make it as transparent as we possibly can. Is there anybody else can add to that issue that some might consider, hey, this black box that we have with respect to my proposal, I'd like to get and have a better understanding of what that process is. Maybe,
If I could,
Go ahead.
I would say, if you're interested in an even deeper understanding, right, beyond what we've described here, and you're not planning on applying in this current cycle, an excellent way to gain some of that experience and insight is volunteering to serve as an expert reviewer yourself.
That's exactly the segue I was looking for. That takes us right into this next slide here, a panel manager and panelist recruitment. Because to that point, being involved in the process, it really gives you some insight in terms of what goes on inside the black box, so to speak. Amer, can you take it from here?
Sure, thank you, Keith. So for panel managers, NIFA recruits and hires experts in the discipline to help with the peer review process. And if we can go to the next slide. So in terms of the panel manager and how panel managers are considered, they are typically active and established professionals. They are experts in the program area for the specific panel they are being recruited for. And I would really like to note here that the panel manager, when hired to serve as a panel manager for a particular program at NIFA, they are temporary federal employee for the duration of their panel manager appointment. So, so what are the roles of a panel manager? What do they actually do with the panel? Well, let me start by saying that a panel manager and program staff work really closely together. So they work for the program. So the roles of a program manager include recruiting diverse volunteer panelists with the expertise that is relevant for the particular program. They assign applications to panelists. They ensure neutral and fair review process, and they also chair the panel meeting. These are the major functions of a panel manager. And again, everything happens in concert with the program staff. It's a team work to ensure success of the review panel. If we can go to the next slide. So we talked about how a panel manager is recruited. How about recruitment of panelists? every program recruits their panelists with the expertise needed for that specific program. So who can serve as a panelist and how are panelists recruited? Panelists are recruited by the panel manager. They are experts in the applicable professional networks. They may be past applicants or past awardees in the particular program. There are volunteers who contacted the program staff and indicated their interest in serving as a panelist reviewer for the particular program. It's important to note here that NIFA employees are not serving as panelists. The panelists are external experts in the discipline. So, and additionally, what is the number of panelists on a particular review panel? How do we determine this number? It's basically based on the number of applications we receive for that particular program in that particular panel, and what the expertise that is required to review the applications. So these are the two major criteria that will determine what the number of panelists on a particular panel is. And if you can go to the next slide. So how are panelists actually now selected to serve on a NIFA panel? So typically NIFA selects panelists for the review panel based on their training and experience in the relevant research, extension, and education fields, taking into account several of the following criteria. And Dr. Kephart in his opening remark alluded to many of these criteria that we are showing on this slide. So these criteria include the diversity in their professional rank, and also having the review experience, the demographics, including race, ethnicity, and gender, and the geographic location, and also the organization type. And with respect to the organization or institution affiliation, these include land-grant universities, non-land grant universities, private institutions, 1890 institutions, 1994s, insular areas, Hispanic serving, small to medium size, institution at EBSCOR states, also includes industry, state and federal agencies, producers, range of forest managers, operators, health practitioners, educators, and others. So we want to ensure diversity and the expertise and the organization and the professional rank and the geographic location to ensure that we have diverse panels that are also representing the different disciplines as needed for the particular panel. We at NIFA also consider panel continuity from previous years, and we aim to have approximately about 30% continuity from previous panels. If we can go to the next slide. So NIFA continues to ensure panel diversity by improving participation by women and other minorities, but being inclusive in all diversity criteria we already discussed, including the different expertise across institutions and the various appointment terms at the respective institutions as well. So one of the purposes of this session is to, again, demystify the process and to help recruit diverse panelists to our volunteer pool. So if you have served as panelists before, thank you for your service. If you haven't updated your profile, please do so. And if you haven't volunteered before, please volunteer. And we discussed earlier the importance of having this experience on serving as a panel, because it will also help you understand the panel review process and also help you to be also successful in submitting applications in the future as well. And with this, I believe I'm turning it over back to Mallory.
Thanks, Summer. I'll add to that if you know maybe this year isn't going to be a good year for you, but you would love to serve in a subsequent year, don't hesitate to let NIFA staff know, or if one of our panel managers reaches out to you, don't hesitate to let them know, right? That I would, I would love to be contacted next year. We're always looking for experts to serve on these peer review panels, and in particular, right, we often get questions about, so what kinds of experts are you really looking for? We have such a diversity of competitive grant programs, right, across our wonderful breadth of food and agriculture sciences, right? Everything from water, soils, plants, animals, free living human subjects, and families and communities. Sometimes it's quite difficult to convey that breadth. I will say, we're looking for experts who are currently engaged in the field, right? We really are looking for that right fit between the area of expertise and the focus of the competitive grant program. And we are always managing, right, and being really thoughtful when it comes to true or potential conflicts of interest. I'm sure you've heard us say, well, are you thinking of applying this year? Okay, this might not be the best year because we need to make sure that there's no risk of a reviewer or any of their close relatives benefiting, right, personally or financially from the outcome of any particular proposal that's reviewed by that program. We're looking for all kinds of organizations, right, and that's across not only various types of colleges and universities, but experts who may be serving in state and local governments, nonprofit organizations, business. There's so many wonderful ways to be involved, and I will take this initial question shown here as an opportunity, right? Independent consultants, right, of course, may also serve, and it may be, right, from this example that a grant writer is particularly well suited to serve on a peer review panel that is a competitive grant program for a technical assistance provider. We have, right, a great many programs, right, with different areas. It could be that, right, I'm in nutrition, so let's say, right, you're also an expert in dietary assessment, right? There may be a nutrition panel, right, where that expertise would be valuable. So do try to be mindful of the keywords, right, that you're using to describe your expertise, and what lenses we as national program leaders, as program specialists looking for expertise, and panel managers looking for expertise might also be thinking, right? You are thinking about the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and we do very much like to use, right, research, education, and extension, right? Are you an instructional expert? Are you an expert in, right, community outreach and human-centered design? All of these things can be particular areas of expertise that we might be looking for. And I've seen that we've had some questions in the Q&A box about, well, okay, so you're serving as a panelist. You've been asked to serve, what's next, right? What else are those expectations? And we have several characteristics, right? Several areas where we provide training to our peer review panelists, and they're listed and shown on the next slide. I know I already highlighted confidentiality and conflict of interest. Of course, data management and data management plans are areas where we provide training to all of our panelists. There's training in research misconduct, in implicit bias, right? And how we are increasing our own awareness, right? And management of implicit bias, really being more and more mindful, right? And active, right? In our assessment of our own thoughts, to be sure that we are making sure to be as objective as possible using our objective evaluation criteria. Of course, right, you hear us coming back to those evaluation criteria. They're right, we use them as great resources too. As we all work with all kinds of different web applications, there is also, right, a training given in our peer review system, which is the web application that's used to enter, right, and to view the proposals, to enter in individual reviews, to collaborate during panel. Oftentimes you'll hear us refer to it in the shorthand by the initials PRS. So those are some areas in which our panelists are always trained. And even if you were to serve 1 year and then a few years later, we repeat, right? We repeat this. We make sure we're all grounded each year in the expectations and in the work that we're doing together. And that's going to take me to our next area where we're right, where it's understanding what might the workload be, right? If you're interested in volunteering to serve, I'm sure like I do, right? I need to have an understanding of what that full commitment is, and I need to be able to have a conversation with my division director about how we might both manage that, right? Manage that professional opportunity and that time commitment. And so there is a range between 8 and 15 applications that each panelist might be asked to review. The panel manager will be able to give you a more narrow range because of the varying levels of complexity and scale of different grant programs. That's why this is so wide. Again, the panel manager and the national program leader will be able to narrow that down for you so you have a more clear idea. There'll be also a mix of primary reviewer, secondary reviewer, tertiary reviewer responsibilities. And so you can think of that as, am I always going to be the first person to speak, right, and provide that overview, that introduction, or will there be times where I can be, right, very focused on, right, the key strengths and weaknesses that I saw, and that's really kind of what the primary, secondary, tertiary responsibilities are meant to communicate, right? There'll be a balance, and some of that is also illustrated here. As we've said before, right, these conflicts of interest can be on the larger scale, right, with the entire panel if you were to apply, right? So that would be a no-go. But certainly we all have our own lived experiences and histories with one another, right? Co-authors on papers, mentors, mentees, previous employers, and these individual, right, these conflicts of interest, these we check at least 3 times throughout the peer review process, right? We check these before proposal reviewer assignments are made. We check these. Each panelist checks it before going in to really provide an assessment of a proposal. And then before a proposal is to be discussed during panel, it's checked again. this is extremely important to us, right? Preserving the integrity of our process. And if there is a conflict of interest with a particular proposal, that individual leaves the room and doesn't participate in the review, the discussion, or the ranking of that proposal. And this includes, right, our panel managers, our national program leaders, and our program specialists, right? And so we would not be involved with that. We would also leave. And not participate in the review. Also, right, when we're managing our own individual conflicts of interest, we aren't involved in assigning reviewers to those proposals either, right? That's an expectation. So, right, we all have our own mentors and mentees as well, and we're always sure to step away. I do want to emphasize that the involvement and of the full peer review panel during all of the discussion is very important to us. And that's an expectation of a panelist's role in the panel meeting, right? We're all part of ensuring that we're being very objective and mindful and asking very, clear and consistent questions, right, of the evaluation criteria for each proposal. And so you'll see also in the next slide some of these things emphasized again around the panel discussion. There is an additional role that is not for every single proposal, right? But there's one of the individual reviewers for each proposal will be assigned the expectation of recording the discussion and then providing the initial draft of that discussion toward the panel summary. And all three of the individual reviewers, right, can contribute to that final panel summary, and our peer review system, PRS, is the collaboration tool for them all to come together on the final copy. And it is that individual who's determined to be the scribe who notes, right, the full peer review panel discussion for each of those proposals. So that completes overall, right, what kind of those expectations are for serving on panel. So that's what, right, when we're looking for volunteers, we may be asking of you. And we also recognize, right, well, what might be the benefit, right, to you in serving as a volunteer panelist. Certainly, service as a reviewer is a significant contribution to your field. It accelerates the progress across, right, our food and agricultural system, and being invited and selected to serve is a recognition of your expertise, and it can also provide right, that external recognition from an organization, right, such as the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, that could contribute to, perhaps some important components of a career advancement package and an application for promotion, perhaps. It's a great way to expand your own knowledge of NIFA grant programs, as well as of a particular field, right? It may be right. If we're talking about right, not only expertise in let's say cardiometabolic health, but also as an educator, right? An opportunity to serve on an education program panel, right? Being able to really harness and hone both of those skills that contribute to your career. And many of our panelists especially appreciate the networking opportunity that comes with, right, being brought together in a group of, you know, of 20 experts where you know, some of them you may connect with at meetings on an annual basis, but others, you know, you may not have connected with outside of this opportunity. So we do appreciate it when you consider, you know, volunteering your time and expertise to serve on a panel.
Thank you, Mallory. And Emma as well. I mean, going over the panel manager and panelist recruitment, those are certainly very important aspects to our elements of our review process. So we certainly appreciate you being able to give us some insights on that. So we've gone over the peer review process. We've also talked about the panel manager and panelist recruitment. Next, we have how to volunteer to be on a panel. And with that, we'll turn that discussion and lead that discussion from Maurice. Maurice.
Thank you, Keith. And thanks to everyone for your diligence in our session. But this is the fun, also the additional fun part to the presentation. But to carry on, NIFA and your community request your assistance in identifying panelists and ensuring our peer review panels have the required expertise while remaining inclusive, representative, and diverse. NIFA uses a peer review system known as PRS, you'll see that acronym, to collect volunteer information. If you are interested in serving on a peer review panel, you can provide your contact information by visiting NIFA's peer review system, as shown here on the screen, and clicking on the panelist recruitment link in the volunteer section. You will be asked to provide your contact information and expertise. But please note, the PRS has been modified to work on multiple browsers. Edge, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari have all been verified as compatible with PRS as of June 2021. If you have difficulty accessing PRS on one of these browsers, please contact the program staff listed in the request for applications for the program you are interested in serving. Next slide. So you're probably wondering, okay, when I get to that part, what are the steps? What do I do next? So once registered, please alert via email the program staff listed in the request for applications for the program you're interested in serving. Don't forget to attach your CV and resume. In addition, a voluntary questionnaire will appear that is used to gather race, ethnicity, gender, and other information. NIFA collects this information from everyone who participates in USDA activities to allow us to evaluate participation and improve processes in accordance with applicable equal opportunity and civil rights laws. The information you provide will not be used to determine your eligibility to participate in the program. The use of this information will help USDA NIFA to improve the operation of NIFA programs, design additional opportunities for program participation, and monitor enforcement of laws that require equal access to NIFA programs for eligible persons. Next slide. So, wow, we're getting to the point that you can participate, you can get involved. How to serve on a panel. You need to volunteer only once. After that, if you wish to serve on any panel, please contact the program staff. And that program staff information can be obtained from the funding opportunity page or RFA. If you have applied to NIFA programs, your information may already be in the NIFA database. Please let the program staff know you are interested. Program staff will forward your interest to the panel manager for consideration. Next slide. Wow. So you've heard about,
The peer review panel.
because pause it 1 second. You've heard about the peer review process, the panel manager and panelist recruitment, how to be a volunteer to be a panelist. Now, seeing is believing. You are in for a treat. Next, we will show you a mock panel experience to gain a glimpse of what it could look like during this time. Thank you.
For the fiscal year 2023 competitive grants program. I am Dr. Jody Williams, and I'm one of the national program leaders, also referred to as the NPL, who is responsible for managing this program. I am a great resource for inquiries from anyone interested in submitting an application to the program. As the NPL, my role today will be to provide an orientation to discuss the panel process and to answer any questions about the request for applications, also referred to as the RFA, and any general programmatic questions. During the meeting, I will observe and take notes on the discussions, and I'll be available for the duration of the meeting to address any questions about the RFA. Now I'd like to introduce the other members of this team before we go over the schedule and expectation for today's panel. Let's start with the panel manager, Dr. Pascal Jean.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pascal Jean, and I'll be serving as the panel manager for the peer review panel. I'm a temporary part-time NIFA employee. I previously served as a food safety and nutrition educator working with underserved communities. Much of my work is done before the panel meeting, arranging logistics, recruiting panelists, and assigning application to panelists. Today, I will be facilitating the panel discussion and helping to keep things on task. I'll go ahead and hand it back to Jody.
Thanks, Pascal. Next, we'll ask Tammy Neville to introduce herself. Tammy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Neville. I'm a program specialist at NEFA, working with Jody and Bob to help coordinate this virtual panel meeting. I am the contact person should you have any issues with NIFA's online peer review system, also called PRS, that allows you to view the applications and submit your reviews and panel summaries. Throughout the panel meeting, I will be helping with the logistics of the discussion and sharing my screen to facilitate the ranking process by positioning applications in the desired categories. I'll also help to arrange a waiting room for panelists who have a conflict of interest with any application being discussed. Jody will talk more about that in a little bit.
Let's move forward with a brief introduction. Next slide. I want to thank everyone for volunteering your time and expertise to serve on this NIFA panel. When I call your name, please briefly introduce yourself in 30 seconds or less by stating your name, institution or organization, and your areas of expertise. Remember to be brief. Let's start with Logan Appenfeller.
Hi, everyone. I'm Logan Appenfeller, and I'm an assistant professor of community development and environment at People Cooperative University, which is an 1890 institution. Thank you.
Thanks, Logan. Let's move to Dr. Kellyanne Jones Jentgard.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kellyanne Jones Jentgard, and I'm an associate professor of nutrition and food safety from USA Field University, which is an 1862 institution.
Great. Next, we have Dr. Nirja Tyagi.
Hi all, I'm Nirja Tyagi, and I'm an extension specialist with ABC University, which is a non-land grant institution. My area of expertise is community partnerships and emerging audiences. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Lynn Elliston Giddings, please go ahead.
Hello, I'm Lynn Elliston Giddings, and I'm a research specialist focusing on dairy food and food safety at XYZ University, a 1994 institution. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Cassandra Huey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cassandra Healy, and I'm an environmental scientist at USDA. My expertise is in climate change and its impact on food production. Thank you.
Great. And last but not least, we have Dr. Adam Wilkie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Adam Wilkie, and I'm an expert in food safety from Eagles Center for Excellence, which is a center for nonprofits and industry.
At this time, we'll begin the review of application number 13897. We have two conflicts of interest for this application. So at this time, Cassandra Yui, you will be in the waiting room for the duration of the discussion. And Jody, you also have a COI with this application. So Bob will be stepping in to take notes and answer programmatic questions during this discussion. Tammy, please go ahead and put Cassandra and Jody in the virtual waiting room.
They have both been moved out of the meeting room and into the waiting room. So Dr. Jean, we can progress.
Okay, great. The title of this application is Enhancing Food Safety During the Super Bowl Through Education, Extension, and Outreach. And it was submitted from USA Field University. The PD is Patrick Mahomes. For this application, panelist 1 who will also serve as a scribe and take notes during the discussion is Logan Appenfeller. Panelist 2 is Nirja Tiagi, and panelist 3 is Adam Wilkie. The project type for this application is community outreach, and it is a resubmission. The project period is for 2 years, and the total amount of funding requested is $1 million. Logan rated this application as excellent. Nirja gave it a rating of very good, and Adam rated it as good. I'll be handing things off to Logan to provide the summary and his preliminary ratings for this application. And I request the panelists be mindful of the time as we have lots of applications to go through before we break for lunch.
Okay, thank you. Well, to start off, the overall goal of this project is to enhance food safety education by developing a collaborative infrastructure in the Midwest for delivering education, training, and technical assistance to community partners. I noted several strengths with this application. The impacts presented in the application are realistic and the goals align with this program's objectives. With this being a resubmission, the applicant's responses to the previous panelists' comments adequately address the concerns raised by the previous panelists. Another substantial strength of the application is their plan to establish partnerships with community-based non-governmental organizations and community members with lived experiences in the planning and execution of the project. The timeline is detailed and seems reasonable to achieve the proposed objectives as well. The planned education and outreach activities focus on customizing food safety education programs to address the specific needs of the communities they'll serve. And this is an important focus of the community outreach project type that was outlined in the program's RFA. As far as weaknesses, the authors proposed to purchase a significant amount of equipment, and I wasn't clear about what types of equipment are appropriate for purchasing.
I can provide some clarification from page 6 of the RFA. In quote, it says, equipment purchases are allowable for most NIFA programs if they're well justified and align with the overall project's goals and objectives. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Given this information, I view the equipment as aligned with the objectives of the project, and I think it will help achieve the project goals. I view that as another strength of the project overall. One critique I have for this application is the narrative is too dense. I would have liked to see some tables or figures to break things up and summarize important points. So to summarize, overall, I thought this was a very strong application and I gave it a rating of excellent.
Okay, Logan has rated this application as excellent. We'll now hand it over to panelist 2, Nirja.
I agree with many of the first panelist's comments, so I won't repeat all the strengths he has listed. I thought that objectives were clear and the evaluation plan seemed adequate and reasonable for measuring project outcomes. As far as the weaknesses, I thought that budget was not well justified. The travel costs are not realistically described, but this is a minor flaw that can be changed. I'm not very familiar with the specifics of the novel conservation methods proposed in the objective 2. So it was difficult for me to assess this objective was reasonable given the highly technical description provided. All things considered, I thought that strengths outweighed the weaknesses of this application, and therefore I rated it as very good.
Thank you, Nirja. We'll go ahead and give Adam the floor.
Well, I have to say that I'm not even sure we were reading the same application. I have a very different perspective on many of the things mentioned by my colleagues. A big concern of mine is the institutional commitment to partnerships. I have worked with other collaborators from USA Field University, and I know from my previous experience that the institution does not commit sufficient resources for partnerships.
I'd like to jump in here to remind all panel members that we must evaluate all applications based on the criteria given in the RFA and the program and the grant application as submitted. Prior knowledge of information outside of the application should be kept out of the review process. Also, please consider all the evaluation criteria and not just one of the few items.
Thank you, Dr. John. I had another concern with the cost effectiveness of the budget, and I think the budget justification is lacking important details. Well, considering my concerns, I rated this application as good.
Okay, Adam has rated this application as good.
Can I jump in to respond to the concerns about the budget? I have to disagree with Adam here. I think that the budget request is reasonable considering the large number of collaborators included in the project. The team also thoughtfully provided equal compensation for all members of their community advisory board.
Okay, thank you both for this robust discussion. At this time, we'll go ahead and open the discussion for the rest of the panel if anyone would like to add something that hasn't already been discussed. Hearing none, this concludes the panel discussion for this application. Tammy, could you please display the ranking board? Let's talk about the placement of this application within the funding category of the ranking board. Logan, you are the primary panelist for this application. Can you please place this on the ranking board?
Sure. I thought that this was a very strong application with only a few minor weaknesses, and I would place this in the upper portion of high priority.
Okay, do others with this are okay with this placement?
Despite some minor flaws, I think this is a great application, and I would place it in the middle of high priority.
Okay, Adam, what are your thoughts?
Well, although I had initially rated this application as good, after listening to the points raised by the other panelists, I'd like to change my rating to very good. However, given my concerns with the budget, I would feel more comfortable placing this application in the upper portion of medium.
Hi, everyone. This is Tammy jumping in. Please remember that if you decide to change your individual rating system after discussion, then you'll have to make that change in the peer review system as well. I can help if anybody needs any guidance on how to make that change in PRS. Please send me a message in the chat.
Thank you, Tammy, for your help. This is interesting. It looks like we have different rankings for this application, the high priority column and the medium priority column. Other panelists, what do you think is the most appropriate ranking for this application?
I was not assigned as a panelist for this application, so I've not read it in detail. However, I have expertise and experience in the project area. Hearing these panelist summaries and some of the discussion here, this application sounds very innovative. I'd agree to place it in the middle of the high priority category.
Thank you for your thoughts, Lynn. Panelists, we need to conclude here. We have many more applications to go. Logan, after hearing the input from everyone, where would you like to place this application?
I agree with Lynn. I think we can go with the middle of high priority.
Are you all in agreement with the middle of high priority placement for this application?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I suppose I can live with that.
Okay, this concludes the panel review for this application. Tammy, can you please move the application over to the middle portion of high priority?
Okay, let's continue to move forward here, and we'd like to certainly show some of the training resources and materials in this case. You can see this presentation and this recording. It'll in fact be made available by accessing this link below. And also understand that the panelist resources, they're also will be made available. You certainly access it with the hyperlink or by using the QR code listed here. And our training page in this case has several presentations that very well might be very helpful to you in this process. Next slide, please. Yes, we would love to have your feedback. You can send feedback to our learning and development team at NIFA. You can be reached at this hyperlink at adminsopteams@nifa@usda.gov. We'd really like to have you reach out for your feedback, and we'd like to keep in touch with you on any future events that we may have as well. Now, our non-discrimination statement is something that we certainly feel is very important to what we do. It is in fact accordance to federal civil rights law and with the USDA's civil rights regulations and policies. It involves the USDA's agencies, its offices, its employees, any institutions participating or even administrating in USDA programs. They're all prohibited from discriminating based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender identity, including gender expression, sexual orientation, disability, age, marital status, family or parental status, income. And that is income derived from many public assistance programs, including political beliefs or reprisals or retaliations. So essentially what we have here is, again, we have USDA's discrimination statement. And also I'd like for you to just maybe pause just a minute, and the other bullet points will give you some contact information in terms of if you need to feel free to be able to report or bring something to the attention. Again, those final 2 bullet points in this case will give you access by phone numbers as well as addresses to send any complaints. Next slide, please. I think we've had a chance here where we have answered a number of different questions. In fact, we're very pleased to see in the Q&A feature, there were a number of different questions that were asked, and I believe just about all of them were answered in this case. So certainly appreciate the fact that you found the content in a way that is that provoked questions and also allowed us and provided us an opportunity at NIFA to be able to respond to those questions. So with that, we'd certainly like to thank you for taking the time to attend this session on demystifying the panel review process, and for your continued support to the supply and consuming of food, fiber, and energy to the U.S. economy. It was certainly wonderful to have you join the session, and on behalf of NIFA, I want to personally thank you for your participation. Thank you.